Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Thanks for watching Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage Vault Series. The Vault Series is a series of interviews that we shot starting back in 2004, 2 years before the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum opened to the public. If you like what you see, please be sure to hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. Thanks for watching. Today's guest is Bill Carson. Bill was with Fender guitars for decades. Bill was the guitar player that actually took a Fender Telecaster and cut it down to his specifications. Bill took a hacksaw and made the guitar body feel better to his body, both for his arm to go over the front and for it to fit on his front so that it wouldn't dig in his ribs. He tells the development of that guitar, which later became known as the Fender Stratocaster, the #1 selling guitar in the world.
In '51, I joined a pretty big band that was forming in California, in Orange County at Anaheim, and I consequently looked up Leo Fender right away in '52. So from '52 to 2002, I've had a lot of various positions with Fender, and some of them part-time, and then I went on a payroll in '57, and from there on we did a lot of stuff. But in the early days, the reason that I looked him up to begin with was that I didn't like the Telecaster. He sold me one and a Pro Amp for $18 a month, and pretty soon he had me working out there every morning just about it. And I finally said, there's something wrong with this picture. I'm making payments to you, and yet I'm working here all the time. And he wrote my $18 contract on a piece of legal paper, and he went to this old rickety file cabinet and found it and tore it up, and so we had a pretty good relationship after that. It was difficult for me to sit on stools, and the stools were so high, and it seemed like every radio station, every recording studio, the gigs in the clubs that you play, I had to sit on that stool, and the edge of the Telecaster would dig into my ribs, and it got to be unbearable. I sawed it off, and my arm was in a bad position. I sawed that off, and then you couldn't tune it. You couldn't tune it then. You can't tune it now if it's got 3 bridges. It was an impossible, tonal impossibility to tune a Telecaster. You could stagger the bridges and get somewhat close, but the producers of a lot of the recording sessions that I was doing in those days, a lot of them were just demo sessions, but if you played out of tune, you didn't get called back anymore. And I finally sawed the bridges in tune, propped them up with striker strips off of matches to intonate them, and it was a real job if I ever broke a string, because it took a long, long time to get all 6 of those little parts to working again. And Leo was a very deep problem analyzer, I would say, that one of the most clever engineers that I'd ever seen. But the trick was to convince him that there was a problem. He didn't understand intonation. He couldn't play guitar. He couldn't tune a guitar, and he was pitch deaf in the sense that he had no pitch reference. But he would depend on an oscilloscope and a voltmeter and a few other things to get him by through some of the stuff that where a real-time analyzer later on years, of course, would have done all that, but nothing like that was available in those days. But I finally convinced him that I wanted a guitar for myself, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted on it, and could he build it? And he wouldn't listen to me at all in the beginning. And after quite a long time, I was working on bands in and out from 52 and 53. I was on Hank Thompson's band, and I was in and out of Fender during those years, still trying to get my guitar made. And in 54, 53, the last part of 53, I was there pretty consistently. And he finally agreed to do some things that I wanted, which in the beginning I wanted 4 pickups, because in those days the only way that you could could really get different tones was through the change of pickup and its position relative to the strings. There are certain areas of nodal points or gathering spots in a string where a pickup has to set to get the most vibration or signal strength out of that string. So he wouldn't go for 4 pickups. He said, if you get 3, if we put this thing in production, said 3 will wow them, because all they've ever had was 2 pickups before, talking about the customers. And I said, I don't care about the customers. I don't care if we ever make another one. I just want what I want. And fortunately, he finally listened to me, and we got 2 working models, 2 prototypes. The first prototype had the bridge adjustments on the individual string saddles was exact opposite to what a Strat is today. You had to slip a screwdriver underneath the string in order to adjust that horizontal bridge section. And the first night I played that, I knew if I broke a string, I would be in trouble trying to do that on a half-dark bandstand. So I called him at break time and said, this thing is all wrong and it's got to be fixed. A couple of days later, I was out at the plant, and he had changed it around in the course of getting what I wanted. He changed that lip totally and put it in the configuration that the Strat is in today. And the reason I brought up the point that he is such a deep analytical thinker was that he never once put anything down on paper when it came to building those individual bridge sections. When I finally got it through his head what intonation was all about, not only the distance between the bridge and the nut, but the height from the string to the 12th fret, where when you bend it, you're going to sharp it to some degree, and you've got to adjust for that to do it to the real critical factor. You'd have to adjust every set of strings you put on, because there's small differences in them. But once he got that locked into his head, he handmade these things out of just raw hot rolled steel. And he never once to my knowledge, put anything on paper. He drilled and tapped those bridge sections with 440 threads, and he put 1/4-inch Allen screws on the 2 outsides, then 5/16 on the next one, and 3/8 on the 2 in the middle. 3/8 by 440, all of them were 440 threads. And the vertical adjustment and the lateral adjustment has never been changed. We fooled around with the cosmetics of it and changed pickup configurations from time to time, but the customer didn't like it that well. He wanted that same old Strat. It, in essence, hasn't been really changed since 1953. We got in some of those older Strats and compared the output of the pickups, and there were variances, but there was one thing that was a constant, was that there was a tone that only these older pickups were getting, and it wasn't the way that they were wound, because the windings could be all over the place. As long as that voltmeter said that they were in this range, they got passed and put on the guitar. But some girls, they handheld the wire, the 41,000th and the 42,000th wire, and they acted as a level wind in this coil form as it went around and around. Leo made all of these things. And some girls would wind it real tight. They'd put a piece of masking tape around their finger, a couple of drops of 3-in-1 oil, and that would give it to lubrication. They could wind that pickup coil pretty tight. Well, the next girl might wind up a fluffy type coil, but it would still pass. But that wasn't the differences. The differences we finally realized was that magnet strength was wearing out. And because the magnet strength had dissipated anywhere from 20 to about 35%, it changed the tone way down there. The bluesy type thing like Stevie Ray and Clapton, some more of these guys liked so well. It was there in those old guitars. So at Fender, our up-to-date engineers said we can make a pickup just like that, which they did. We made the pickup, romanced it by calling it a Texas Special, and it was nothing more than a worn-out Strat pickup as far as the sound of it was concerned.
When you said that you sawed off the body on the Tele, what did you mean by that?
I took a hacksaw and I sawed it, and then I had to sand it. On the top bout, I sawed that off because it was catching me in my ribs, and I sawed a little bit off the front because my arm was in a cocked position. I didn't like that, and I took a little bit out in here, and it became much more comfortable after I sanded on it for a long time. The word got around to the excuse me, the players on the West Coast, which are about 3 or 4 that are doing most of the major sessions, and they would come borrow my guitar because it intonated, it played so great that I'd have to go out and chase them down. They wouldn't bring it back. So they started hitting Leo to make one of them like Carson's guitar. And about that time, Don Randall was pressuring Leo to get another guitar in the line. And in that particular period, it was decided that they would take Carson's guitar and put it in the line. Randall named it the Stratocaster, which there was during those years, there was a lot of stratosphere things going on, and to follow the Telecaster, it seemed an appropriate name. Leo would ask Randall to put a new product through the main dealers on the West Coast, so if there was anything wrong, it would be easier to get them back and fix it instead of spreading it all over the country. He was very critical about doing everything exactly like it should be. And thankfully, the whole musical world should be grateful to him for that, because he was one of the few men that I've ever known that had that kind of integrity, both musical and personal, to do the thing right. Freddie Tavares was the other one. He was a great asset to Leo after he came to work. Freddie's first job at Fender was to draw the Stratocaster in order to get patents and the like on it, which I didn't care anything about patents. I knew that 95% of the guitar was my ideas, and that I didn't have the expertise to put them into being. But further down the line, a lot of people claim credit for that, and I guess they'll have to live with themselves. But there were 3 or 4 people that were definitely involved in addition to myself. George Fullerton said, "We've got a big problem of return Telecasters with wrecked jacks. Why don't we put a front-loaded jack in the front of Bill's guitar?" And they did. And Lucille Fullerton, his wife, said, "Gee, that looks like a contoured body." And that name stuck. I don't know who, but it wound up in being on the decal of Fender guitars later, original contour body. That was her claim to the guitar, which I think was a pretty good one. Freddie, at that time on the first prototype, there was no second horn down here on the lower bout. It was just chopped off and kind of rounded a little bit. And I always insisted with Leo that an instrument that you hold ought to fit you like a custom-made shirt. It should move only when you do, and you shouldn't have to sustain it this way or hold it down with your thumb this way to keep the instrument to balance. So we would put these various raw bodies. He had 4 or 5 one morning when I come in, and he put these various raw bodies on with a strap and a neck, and I'd shake my shoulders. If it moved one way or the other, I'd say, "No, that's not it." And this top horn began to grow to get a balance. And it grew out to about here, and it was pretty good. And I could move around and the guitar would stay put. So whatever dexterity you had between your 2 hands, you were free to play the instrument and not have to hold it up and then try to play, or press it down and try to play. Freddie said, "You know, the thing wouldn't look quite so ugly if you put a lower horn on it." And he said, "I don't think it'll disturb the balance." And I said, "Fine, I don't care what it looks like. It plays like I want it to." And that was great. So the bottom horn grew out there, and that was on the second prototype. I made another one after they had routed me a body, and I worked down the necks. I always worked the necks down to suit myself. And
When you say work the neck down, you mean?
I sanded it down, yeah, sanded it down. Most Fender necks in the early days were the direct result of whatever the hand sander that sanded it thought it ought to feel like, because there wasn't that kind of equipment to bring it every neck into a spec like there is today. But you could take a dozen Fender Strats off of any music store wall, and you'll feel all 12 of them feel different. So I would hand sand the neck down to where it felt right to me. Then I'd get a coat of sanding sealer shot on it, and beyond that I didn't care. The maple neck was always my favorite, but the neck and body would be joined together, these rough ones I'm talking about. I'd shake my shoulders with the thing until we finally got a balance. And then that led to the second guitar. The prototype I took with me. I worked almost a year with Wade Ray, the band, on the road. And I took the prototype in addition to another guitar that I had made, and I think it was shot in some color. I'm not sure about that, I don't remember. That was pretty much the start of the Stratocaster. It went on to evolve, of course, to the world's best instrument